School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by Saskatchewan Pulse Growers and BASF.
My name is Hector Cárcamo. I'm a research scientist with the Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada Research Centre at Lethbridge. Lygus bugs are native insects. They are also known as plant bugs. They belong to a family called Myrridae. And this family contains a very large group of insects that feed on the sap of plants. And Lygus bugs, they feed on the reproductive parts of many plants. They have a very wide host range and they are native insects. So that means that they have been in Canada forever before we started agriculture. And now that we have started planting crops like canola and faba beans, alfalfa, hemp, sunflowers, they are quite happy to have all this food available, and once in a while their numbers reach outbreak levels and they have the potential to cause yield damage or affect the quality of our crops.
And what does a Lygus bug actually look like?
Okay, a Lygus bug, it's a fairly small insect. It'd be about probably 5 to 6 millimeters long, and they are somewhat oval in shape. The color tends to be brownish. Some of them are pale green. Some of them are a little bit darker reddish. I should mention that the Lygus bug is a common name that we use to describe a complex of species. And there is actually 3 or 4 species that can be found in agricultural crops. The most common Lygus in our area is one called Lygus keltoni, and we do not have a common name for it. This would be a bit on the reddish side. It's similar to the tarnished plant bug that is the most common Lygus pest in the northern hemisphere, or at least in North America. But that one is more common in the wet, more humid areas. So in our region we find more of this Lygus keltoni, and also another one called Lygus elysus. It's more of a pale species. And there's another Lygus species that is more common in alfalfa fields also.
And what sort of damage does it do to faba beans?
Yes, Lygus damage can, similar to other crops, they will pierce the seed when the seed is still soft. They will also pierce on the flowers and the buds. It's very similar to what they do to canola. So they feed on the reproductive structures, the flowers, the buds, the young seeds, the pods. And in faba bean in particular, the main concern is the loss of quality, because the punctures on the seeds will develop into these dark spots. And when the grain is marketed for human consumption, it may lose its quality and it may be rejected. So there is a threshold of about 15% of seeds with damage. If anything over that, then the crop may be degraded and there would be a penalty in terms of prices. If it's more than 25%, it could be downgraded altogether to hog feed, and then the price would be significantly lower.
And what sort of options do farmers have for control? Can you spray for them?
It is possible to spray for them, and this is the research that we are doing now. I'm in the process of doing the data analysis. So far, the partial analysis that I have done, so these numbers are tentative, we might change them once the entire analysis is completed. It looks like about 5 Lygus per 10 sweeps at the late flower, early pod stage. Is about a threshold when they could cause damage that could exceed 15% of the seeds with damage. And there are insecticides available that are registered. People would have to consult their provincial books to see what's available, or consult their provincial entomologist. It looks like the Lygus bugs do not actually impact the weight of the seed. It seems that the damage is really the loss of seed quality, so that's a concern. The threshold is likely going to be lower than what producers are used for canola, because whenever we're dealing with cosmetic quality damage, then we don't need as many insects to result in that kind of damage. With regards to controlling Lygus bugs in faba beans, something we have to keep in mind and be very aware is that faba bean requires pollinators. It requires some form of help to complete its pollination. So we need to keep that in mind, that when we apply an insecticide to control a Lygus bug, especially if it's still at the flower stage, near the end of flower, then there could be a potential yield penalty in terms of the weight. So that's something that I think producers need to keep in mind when applying an insecticide. And in general, I think people are aware that insecticides are not just going to kill the insect pest. They're also going to impact the beneficial, the natural enemies, the predators and parasitoids. So it's important to think about the economic thresholds and follow these guidelines before actually applying an insecticide.
What sort of conditions do Lygus bugs like?
Well, that's an interesting question. We have been doing a study for many years, and it appears that dry conditions would favor Lygus bugs, but 2017 has been a dry year, and for some reason we don't seem to have as many Lygus bugs. So it's a complicated system for any insect. What affects the population of an insect, it has to do also with overwintering conditions. So if the winters are longer and they have to stay sleeping during the winter for a longer period, some insects may run out of food or run out of fat reserves, and then they may not overwinter as well. So that might have something to do with the low numbers of Lygus that we're seeing this year.
And how quickly do they reproduce?
Lygus bugs can probably complete a life cycle in about a month. That is under ideal conditions, though. We have a Lygus colony at the research center, and they complete a cycle going from egg to adult and reproducing again in about 1 month. But in the field, when the conditions are quite different and they don't eat as much, they experience colder nights, then the cycle will be longer. So we see about 2 generations of Lygus bugs in our situation in southern Alberta. If you were living in Texas, you probably will see something like 4 generations. But if you live in the Peace River, you only see 1 generation a year. So it varies with the weather.